My name is Trevor, and at 32 years old I've built a successful tech company despite being the forgotten son. For years I watched my parents shower my brother Malcolm with endless praise and opportunity while I struggled alone. When I accidentally discovered they had completely erased me from their will, I accepted that painful reality. But nothing prepared me for the day they called asking for nearly $200,000 after Malcolm bankrupted them. What happened next changed our family forever. If you're watching this story right now, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to support family stories that show sometimes the hardest boundaries create the most healing. Stick around to see how I turned devastating betrayal into an opportunity for transformation. Growing up in suburban Boston, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. Malcolm was the golden child born with natural charm and talent that seemed to emanate from him effortlessly. 3 years older than me, he set a standard I could never quite reach, no matter how hard I tried. Malcolm excelled at everything he touched: sports, academics, social situations, while I was the hard-working younger brother who had to put in twice the effort for half the recognition. Our childhood home was filled with trophies, medals, and framed certificates, 90% belonging to Malcolm. My academic achievements, though solid, were overshadowed by his exceptional ones. When I brought home an A- on a difficult math test after studying for days, my father gave a distracted nod. When Malcolm brought home an A in the same subject that seemed to come naturally to him, there was celebration and praise. Malcolm just has that special quality, my mother would say to her friends during coffee gatherings I'd overhear from the stairs. Trevor is, well, he tries very hard. The subtext was clear. Trying hard was somehow less impressive than natural brilliance. Sports followed the same pattern. Malcolm was captain of the soccer team while I found my niche in track and field. When I won a regional competition in the 400-meter dash, my parents attended but spent most of the event checking their watches, anxious to get to Malcolm's soccer game afterward. My trophy went on the bottom shelf of the living room cabinet, while Malcolm's larger soccer trophies dominated the top 2 shelves, illuminated by carefully positioned accent lighting. The pattern escalated during our high school years. Malcolm was popular, dated the prettiest girls, and was voted most likely to succeed. I focused on academics and a small circle of loyal friends. We weren't in direct competition, having different strengths and interests, yet the comparison was constant and always unfavorable to me. The first truly serious incident of favoritism came when it was time for college. Malcolm had been accepted to Cornell University, an achievement my parents celebrated with a lavish party. When my acceptance letter from Boston University arrived, my mother simply said, "That's nice, dear," before changing the subject to Malcolm's campus visit plans. The disparity became painfully clear when financial discussions began. My parents had saved for college, but not enough for both of us at expensive private universities. The decision was made without any real discussion. "Malcolm has a chance at an Ivy League education," my father explained. "We need to support that opportunity. You can go to state college and work part-time. You've always been good at juggling responsibilities." And so I did. While Malcolm enjoyed the full college experience with his housing, meals, books, and even spending money covered by my parents, I worked 20 hours weekly at a campus coffee shop, plus another 15 hours waiting tables on weekends. I took out student loans and stretched every dollar while pursuing my business degree. Meanwhile, Malcolm majored in economics, joined a fraternity, and spent spring breaks in Cancun on my parents' dime. Despite this clear imbalance, I maintained a relationship with my family. Sunday dinners when possible, holiday gatherings, occasional phone calls with my mother. Love for them remained complicated by growing resentment and hurt I tried to suppress. One Christmas during my junior year of college stands out vividly. After working extra shifts to afford modest gifts for everyone, I arrived home to find a massive celebration of Malcolm's internship offer from a prestigious financial firm. My parents gave him a new laptop for his career development. My gift was a sweater from a department store, the price tag accidentally left on revealing it had been purchased during a clearance sale. That night, lying in my childhood bed, I made a decision that would shape my future. I would succeed not in spite of the lack of support, but because of it. The self-reliance I'd been forced to develop would become my strength. I would build something that was entirely my own achievement. After graduation, While Malcolm moved to Manhattan with a generous getting-started check from our parents to supplement his finance job, I relocated to Austin, Texas. The distance was partly practical. The tech scene was booming, and living costs were lower than Boston, but also emotional. I needed space to forge my identity away from the shadow of my brother and the constant subtle reminders of my second-place status in the family. Throughout these formative years, I noticed another pattern that would later prove significant. Despite Malcolm's many advantages and accomplishments, he never seemed to develop financial responsibility. His credit cards were frequently maxed out. He leased luxury cars he couldn't really afford. When he overspent, which happened regularly, my parents would bail him out, calling these rescues early inheritance, advances, or family helping family. I made a conscious choice not to ask for such help, even during my leanest months after college, when ramen noodles were a staple, and I slept on a mattress on the floor of a shared apartment. My pride wouldn't allow it, and something told me that self-sufficiency would serve me better in the long run than dependency, no matter how comfortable that dependency might be in the short term. My first job in Austin was an entry-level position at a mid-sized tech company. The salary barely covered my expenses, but the experience was invaluable. While my coworkers headed to happy hours after work, I returned to my sparse apartment to work on what I hoped would become my ticket to independence, a software application that would streamline project management for creative agencies. Weeknights, until 1 or 2 in the morning all day on weekends, the project consumed my free time. I lived on coffee determination and the burning desire to prove my worth, if only to myself. My social life was practically non-existent that first year, but the foundation I was building would prove worth the sacrifice. The pivotal moment came at a regional tech conference I had saved for months to attend. During a breakout session on startup funding, I met Ryan Cooper, a programmer with complementary skills to mine and a similar hunger for success. We connected instantly over coffee, afterward sketching ideas on napkins and finishing each other's sentences as we refined the concept for what would eventually become Creative Sphere, our project management platform. "You've thought this through more thoroughly than 90% of the pitches I hear," Ryan said, examining my wireframes and business projections. "But you're thinking too small. This could be bigger." With Ryan on board, we spent 6 months developing a working prototype while maintaining our day jobs. Then came the grueling process of seeking investment. 37 pitches, 37 rejections. Some investors thought the market was too saturated. Others didn't believe 2 unknown developers could compete with established companies. Each rejection fueled my determination rather than diminishing it. On our 38th pitch to a small angel investor named Barbara Wright, something clicked. She asked tougher questions than previous potential investors, challenged our assumptions, but also recognized the unique value proposition we offered. "You're solving a problem I've experienced firsthand in my marketing agency," she said, "and you're hungry. I like hungry founders." Her initial investment of $75,000 wasn't huge by startup standards, but it was enough to allow me to quit my day job and focus full-time on Creative Sphere. Ryan followed 3 months later when we secured our first major client, a regional advertising agency, willing to take a chance on our platform. During this period of intense work and gradual business growth, I met Natalie Kim at a local tech meetup. Unlike previous relationships that had fizzled due to my work commitments, Natalie understood ambition. As a graphic designer building her own freelance business, she respected my drive and supported my vision. "What you're creating isn't just a business," she told me one night as we shared takeout in my slightly upgraded apartment. "It's proof of what you're capable of." I admire that. With Natalie, I could share both the victories and setbacks of building a company from scratch. She celebrated our first month of positive cash flow with a homemade dinner. She brought coffee and stayed up with me when we had to rebuild our server architecture after a crash. She became not just my girlfriend, but my emotional anchor in a life that still felt untethered from family support. Despite my growing success in Austin, visits home to Boston remained exercises in frustration. Nothing had changed in the family dynamic. Malcolm, now working at his finance firm in New York, remained the center of attention, even as whispers of his lavish spending and workplace issues began to surface. During one rare visit home, I attempted to share news of a significant contract we'd landed with a national marketing firm. "That's nice, honey," my mother said, barely glancing up from her phone. "Did you hear Malcolm is being considered for a promotion? He might be the youngest vice president in his company's history." The conversation immediately pivoted to Malcolm's prospects, his apartment in Manhattan, the woman he was dating from a good family. My business milestone evaporated from the conversation as if it had never been mentioned. A particularly painful Thanksgiving stands out in my memory. After not seeing my family for nearly 8 months, I flew to Boston excited to share our company's growth. We had expanded to 7 employees and moved into actual office space. For the first time, I felt I had achievements that even my success-oriented parents would have to acknowledge. Instead, dinner conversation revolved entirely around Malcolm's new position and his recent feature in a local business publication. When I mentioned that Creative Sphere had been profiled in a tech industry blog, my father nodded distractedly and asked Malcolm about his thoughts on market trends. "Your brother is moving in serious financial circles now," my father said proudly, "making connections that will set him up for life." I caught Natalie's eye across the table. She had joined me for the holiday and was witnessing firsthand what I'd described about my family dynamic. Her slight headshake communicated both understanding and indignation on my behalf. That night in our hotel room, she held me as I finally verbalized what I'd felt for years. I could cure cancer, and they'd ask if Malcolm had any thoughts on my research. I said, attempting humor to mask hurt. "Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it," Natalie replied. "It just diminishes them." As Creative Sphere continued to grow, I created the life I wanted in Austin. We secured another round of funding, expanded our client base nationally, and continued improving our platform. I purchased my first home, a modest 3-bedroom house with a yard where Natalie and I planted a garden together. The achievement felt especially significant given my parents had provided the down payment for Malcolm's Manhattan apartment. Each success, each milestone, reinforced what was becoming increasingly clear. I didn't need my parents' approval or support to build a meaningful life. The validation I had sought for so long from them was less important than the respect I had earned from my team, my clients, my partner, and most importantly, myself. Still, a lingering hope remained that eventually my parents would recognize what I had built, that they would see that quiet determination could create success just as valuable as their golden child's more flashy achievements. That hope, however misguided, kept me tethered to a family connection that had given me little in return. My grandmother Martha, my father's mother, passed away when I was 30. Unlike my parents, Grandma Martha had always shown me equal affection and interest. During college, she would send me small checks with notes saying, "For books or fun, your choice." She asked about my business ideas with genuine curiosity during holiday gatherings when everyone else was focused on Malcolm. Her funeral brought the family together in Boston. Malcolm flew in from New York, arriving late to the service in an expensive suit, offering polished condolences that somehow felt rehearsed. I had arrived 2 days early to help my parents with arrangements, quietly handling details while processing my own grief. After the service, the family gathered at my parents' home for the reading of Grandma Martha's will. To everyone's surprise, especially mine, she had left me $20,000 and her collection of first-edition classic novels that we had often discussed during my visits with her. To Trevor, the lawyer read, who reminds me of his grandfather in all the best ways, hard-working, thoughtful, and unafraid to chart his own course. The room fell silent. My mother's lips tightened into a thin line. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. Malcolm looked genuinely shocked, as if the concept of me receiving recognition had never occurred to him as a possibility. "She always was a bit eccentric, my mother," finally said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. The days following the funeral were tense. I stayed to help my parents organize Grandma's belongings from her assisted living apartment. While sorting through papers in my father's home office looking for specific documents the lawyer had requested, I accidentally opened the wrong folder. Inside was my parents' will, recently updated according to the date on the cover page. Curiosity and a sense of foreboding compelled me to read it. What I found shattered any remaining illusions about my place in the family. I had been completely removed from the will, Every asset from the family home to investments to personal possessions was designated solely to Malcolm. Even items from my childhood, sports trophies, school projects my mother had saved, were bequeathed specifically to my brother. A small notation indicated that the will had been updated shortly after Malcolm had experienced financial difficulties the previous year. My hands trembled as I replaced the document. The message was unmistakable. I wasn't just the less favored son. I was essentially not considered family in the way that truly mattered. While I had been building my business and life in Austin, I had been systematically erased from my parents' legacy. That evening, still reeling from the discovery, I confronted my parents in their living room after Malcolm had left for dinner with old friends. "I found your will today," I said without preamble. I wasn't snooping. It was with Grandma's papers. My mother's face flushed. My father looked away, suddenly intensely interested in straightening a stack of magazines. "Trevor, wills are private documents," my mother began. "Why am I completely written out?" I asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. Not even a keepsake or memento. Nothing. After an uncomfortable silence, my father sighed. "Malcolm needs more support. He's always struggled with financial stability despite his success. You've proven you can take care of yourself. So I'm punished for being responsible, for not needing bailouts, for building something on my own." "It's not a punishment," my mother insisted. "It's about equalizing things. You have your business. Malcolm has more complicated needs." "Complicated needs," I repeated. "You mean his inability to live within his means, despite earning 6 figures, his 3rd luxury car lease, the condo you helped him buy?" The conversation devolved from there. Decades of hurt and resentment bubbled to the surface. My parents defended their decision with circular logic. Malcolm needed their assets more precisely because he couldn't manage money, while I would be fine without inheritance because I had demonstrated financial responsibility. I left the next morning, instead of staying the additional day I had planned. At the door, my mother hugged me stiffly. "Try to understand, Trevor. Family takes care of family. Malcolm just needs more care." "I'm family too, Mom," I said quietly. Or at least I thought I was. On the flight back to Austin, I called Natalie and told her everything. Her outrage on my behalf was validating, but beneath her anger was genuine concern. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I think I need to accept that their version of family doesn't really include me," I replied. "At least not in the way I've wanted it to." The next 2 years brought significant changes. I limited contact with my parents to brief calls on holidays and birthdays. I focused on expanding Creative Sphere, which was growing steadily. Natalie and I moved in together, discussing marriage and our future. I channeled my energy into building relationships that were balanced and supportive. The last meaningful conversation I had with my mother during this period was a phone call that ended badly. She had called ostensibly to check in, but quickly turned the conversation to Malcolm's new investment opportunity that my father was considering funding. "I need to go, Mom," I interrupted. "I have a business to run." "You always were so sensitive," she replied. "Malcolm never takes things so personally." I hung up without responding. That night I told Natalie I was finally ready to let go of my expectations for parental approval or fair treatment. It was time to accept the family I had, rather than longing for the family I wished I had. "Sometimes the most loving choice we can make is to accept people's limitations," I said, "even when those people are our parents." Little did I know that this hard-won acceptance would soon be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. By my 32nd birthday, Creative Sphere had evolved from a scrappy startup to an established player in the project management software space. We employed 23 people in a modern office in downtown Austin. Our client list included advertising agencies across the country, with emerging markets in Canada and the UK. The bootstrap operation Ryan and I had started had grown into a company valued at several $1 million during our most recent funding round. The validation I had sought for so long from my family came instead from the business community. A profile in Technology Today highlighted our journey from concept to thriving business, describing me as a visionary who identified a market gap and created an elegant solution. The article sat framed in our office reception area, put there by our team, not by me. As the company stabilized and systems were put in place allowing me to step back from day-to-day operations occasionally, I found more balance in my personal life. Natalie and I got engaged during a weekend trip to Big Bend National Park, a simple and heartfelt proposal under the stars that reflected our relationship, authentic without pretense. We began planning our wedding, a moderately sized celebration with friends and colleagues who had become like family. I sent invitations to my parents and Malcolm with modest expectations about their attendance. My parents responded that they would come. Malcolm sent his regrets due to prior commitments. Life had settled into a rhythm I found satisfying. The constant need to prove myself had diminished as I recognized my own accomplishments without requiring external validation. The pain of family dynamics remained, but had dulled to an occasional ache rather than the sharp sting it once was. Then came the call that would upend everything. It was a Tuesday evening. Natalie and I were discussing wedding catering options when my phone rang displaying my father's number. He rarely called, making this unusual enough that I excused myself to answer. "Trevor, my father," said, his voice strained in a way I'd never heard before. "We need to talk. It's important." The tightness in his voice triggered immediate concern, overriding our strained relationship. "Is everyone okay? Is it Mom?" "Your mother's fine. We're having some financial difficulties. Serious ones." I sat down, processing this unexpected information. My parents had always been financially stable. My father's architectural firm had provided a comfortable upper-middle-class life, and their careful investments had grown over decades. What kind of difficulties? What followed was a halting explanation that revealed the extent of the crisis and its cause. Malcolm had launched an investment firm 2 years earlier, targeting unique opportunities in emerging markets. My father had not only invested a significant portion of his retirement savings, but had also co-signed on business loans secured by my parents' home. Malcolm's business had collapsed spectacularly amid allegations of mismanagement and potential securities violations. He had apparently left the country for a temporary reset in Southeast Asia, leaving my parents to face the consequences. "The bank is foreclosing on the house," my father said, his voice breaking. "We've got 60 days. Your mother doesn't know how bad it is yet. I've been trying to figure something out." I stood in stunned silence, struggling to process this information. The golden child had brought down the family finances and then abandoned ship. Then came the real purpose of the call. "Trevor, I wouldn't ask if there were any other options, but we need help, a loan, just until we can sell some assets and get back on our feet." "How much are you talking about?" I asked, already guessing the answer would be substantial. "The outstanding balance is $178,000. The figure hung in the air between us. It was a significant amount, though not impossible given the company's success. But the request carried the weight of decades of family history. "Let me think about it," I said finally. "This isn't a small thing." "Of course," my father replied, relief evident that I hadn't immediately refused. "Take whatever time you need. Just not too much time." After ending the call, I returned to Natalie, who immediately sensed my distress. I explained the situation, watching her expression shift from surprise to indignation. "The audacity," she said when I finished. "They write you out of their will but expect you to write a check when Malcolm creates a disaster." "I know," I agreed, "but they could lose their home." "That's not on you, Trevor. That's on Malcolm, and their enabling of him for 35 years. We discussed the situation long into the night. Natalie, protective of me and the life we were building, initially advocated for a clear refusal. I found myself torn between lingering family loyalty and the legitimate anger at being treated as an ATM after years of emotional neglect. "I need to know more before deciding," I concluded, "about their actual financial situation and what really happened with Malcolm." The next day, I contacted a financial advisor friend in Boston and asked him to discreetly research public records regarding my parents' property and any legal actions pending. His findings confirmed my father's claims, but revealed the situation was even worse. Beyond the home foreclosure, there were tax liens and credit card debt that hadn't been mentioned. Malcolm's business collapse had triggered a comprehensive financial meltdown. Most concerning was what my friend discovered about Malcolm's whereabouts. According to his social media, he wasn't on a temporary retreat, but had relocated to Bali, posting photos of beach views from what appeared to be a luxury villa. While my parents faced financial ruin, their golden child was apparently enjoying tropical drinks by the ocean. This discovery crystallized something for me. This wasn't just about writing a check. It was about a pattern that had defined our family dynamic my entire life. One that had damaged, not just me, but ironically, Malcolm as well. My parents' favoritism and protection had created a person who felt entitled to risk their financial security and then abandon them when consequences arrived. After consulting with Natalie and Ryan, who both offered perspectives, I made my decision. I would go to Boston and address this situation in person, but not in the way my parents expected. The flight to Boston gave me time to refine my approach. This visit wouldn't be about recriminations or settling scores, though the temptation was certainly there. Instead, I needed to address the immediate crisis while challenging the dysfunctional patterns that had created it. My parents' house, the home I grew up in, showed visible signs of neglect as I pulled into the driveway. The lawn needed mowing, paint peeled around window frames, and the overall impression was one of surrender. This wasn't just financial distress, it was emotional defeat, manifested physically. My mother answered the door, surprise registering on her face despite my having called ahead. Perhaps she hadn't believed I would actually come. Behind her, the house looked different. Family photos and artwork that had adorned the walls for decades were missing, likely sold to generate cash. "Trevor," she said, embracing me stiffly, "you didn't need to come all this way. A wire transfer would have been fine." Her assumption that I had already decided to simply hand over the money was telling. Even now, she saw me primarily as a resource, not as a son coming to help his parents through a crisis. "I wanted to understand the situation better," I replied, stepping inside. "Where's Dad?" My father emerged from his study looking older than when I'd seen him last. The confident architect who had always carried himself with authority now moved with the hesitant gait of a man defeated by circumstances beyond his control. We gathered in the living room, the tension palpable. After brief, uncomfortable small talk, I steered the conversation to the matter at hand. "I need to understand exactly what happened," I began. "All of it, not just the version you shared on the phone." What followed was a reluctant but comprehensive account of Malcolm's business venture, my parents' involvement, and the resulting catastrophe. My brother had convinced them to invest initially, then to co-sign loans, then to leverage their home, all for increasingly urgent capital needs and temporary shortfalls. He showed us projections, my father explained, a hint of his old confidence returning as he defended their decisions. 20% returns minimum. It looked sound. "Did you have anyone independent review these projections?" I asked. The silence was answer enough. "And now Malcolm is where exactly?" My parents exchanged glances. "He's taking some time to regroup in Indonesia," my mother said carefully. "This has been very hard on him." Hard on him, I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "He's posting poolside photos while you're facing foreclosure." My mother's expression hardened. "You don't understand the pressure he's been under." His investors were becoming quite hostile. "I am a business owner," I reminded her. "I understand perfectly what responsibility to investors means. It means you face the music when things go wrong. You don't flee the country." The conversation grew heated as years of unspoken tensions rose to the surface. My father, usually the peacekeeper, finally exploded in frustration. "What do you want from us, Trevor? To admit we made mistakes with Malcolm, fine. We made mistakes. We thought he needed more support than you. You were always so capable." "So I was punished for being responsible," I said, voicing the realization that had haunted me since discovering the will, while Malcolm was rewarded for dependency. It wasn't like that, my mother insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "It was exactly like that," I countered. "And now you're facing the consequences of treating one child as if he could do no wrong, and the other as if his achievements didn't matter." My father stood abruptly and paced to the window, staring out at the neighborhood where they might soon no longer reside. "The total amount needed," he said after a long pause, "is $178,000. If you can't or won't help, just say so. We'll figure something out." The dismissal in his tone, as if my presence beyond writing a check was unnecessary, sparked something in me. Not anger, surprisingly, but clarity. "I didn't fly across the country to say no," I replied. "But I didn't come to blindly write a check either." I laid out what I knew about their financial situation beyond what they had disclosed, the tax issues, the credit card debt, the full extent of Malcolm's abandonment of responsibility. "You need more than a loan," I concluded. "You need a comprehensive solution, and more importantly, you need to recognize how we got here." My mother began to object, but my father raised his hand to stop her. For perhaps the first time, he was really seeing the situation, and me, clearly. "What are you proposing?" he asked quietly. I left without making any commitments that day, telling my parents I needed the evening to finalize my thoughts. In reality, I needed space from the emotional intensity of the confrontation. I checked into a hotel and spent hours walking Boston streets, remembering my childhood and adolescence from this new adult perspective. That night I called Ryan to discuss the business implications of what I was considering. Then I called Natalie, who listened as I processed my thoughts. "They created this situation," I told her, "but they're still my parents." "What about your needs?" she asked. "Your feelings matter here too." Oddly enough, this situation is giving me something I've wanted for decades, a chance to be truly seen by them, not just as a resource but as someone whose perspective matters. After our call, I sat by the hotel window looking out at the city lights, understanding that whatever I decided would shape not just my parents' financial future, but our relationship going forward. By morning, my path was clear. The next day, I arrived at my parents' house, with more than just a decision. I brought a comprehensive plan. Before presenting it, I met with a financial advisor I had arranged in advance, bringing him up to speed on the situation and refining the details of my approach. My parents welcomed me with the anxious expressions of people awaiting judgment. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where family dynamics had played out over countless meals throughout my childhood. "I've made my decision," I began, placing a folder on the table between us. "I am prepared to help, but not with a simple loan or gift. What I'm offering is a structured solution with conditions." My father reached for the folder, but I placed my hand on it, maintaining eye contact. "Before you review this, I need you to understand something. This is not just about money. It's about acknowledging patterns that have damaged our family for decades." I outlined the terms I was proposing. I would establish a trust that would pay off the immediate debt threatening their home and provide structured assistance for their other obligations. However, this help came with non-negotiable conditions. "First, you both will attend family counseling with me, not once or twice, but consistently for at least 6 months." My mother began to object, but I continued. "Second, you will take financial literacy courses that I will arrange and pay for. This isn't punishment. It's practical education that will help ensure this situation doesn't repeat. Third, we will have quarterly meetings to review your financial situation and progress. Complete transparency will be required." I paused before delivering the final and most significant condition. "And fourth, you will revise your will to reflect an equal division of assets between Malcolm and me." The silence that followed was profound. My father's face reddened, and for a moment I thought he might refuse outright. My mother looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood disagreements. "This isn't about the money itself," I clarified. "It's about equality and recognition, about acknowledging that I am your son too, with the same standing in this family as Malcolm. You're using our financial crisis to force changes in our personal decisions," my father said, his voice tight. "I'm offering a solution that addresses both the immediate problem and its root causes," I countered. "You're free to decline." "And then what? We lose everything." My mother's voice cracked. "That would be unfortunate, but it would be the consequence of choices made long before today. Choices to favor one son, to enable financial irresponsibility, to co-sign loans without due diligence." I opened the folder and pushed the documents toward them: the trust agreement, the counseling commitment, the financial education plan, and a draft amendment to their will that my lawyer had prepared. "Take time to review everything. Consult your own attorney if you wish. but understand that these terms aren't negotiable. This is the help I'm offering." I stood to leave, giving them space to process. At the door, I turned back. "For what it's worth, I believe this approach will help not just your financial situation, but our family. All of us, including Malcolm." 3 days of tense waiting followed. I extended my hotel stay, anticipating either acceptance or a complete breakdown in communication. On the 4th morning, my father called. "We've reviewed everything," he said, his voice subdued. "We'll agree to your terms." The first family counseling session was scheduled for the following week. I arranged for a respected therapist specializing in family dynamics, preparing myself for resistance and defensiveness. To my surprise, both my parents showed up on time, nervous but present. Dr. Lillian Carter created a safe space for difficult truths. In that first session, we barely scratched the surface, but something important happened. My parents actually listened to my experience of growing up in Malcolm's shadow. "I never realized how much it affected you," my mother said, toward the end of the session, genuine surprise in her voice. "We thought we were just supporting Malcolm's needs." While ignoring mine, I added gently, "Yes," she acknowledged after a pause. "I see that now." The financial aspects of the plan proceeded simultaneously. The trust was established, halting the foreclosure process. My parents began financial literacy classes, approaching them with unexpected commitment. My father, the architect who had always prided himself on precision, seemed almost embarrassed to realize how much he didn't know about personal finance management. About a month into this new arrangement, Malcolm finally contacted my parents from Bali. His call was predictable. He needed money to restart and had a new business idea that required capital. For the first time in his adult life, my parents said no. "We can't help you financially right now, Malcolm," my father told him speakerphone, allowing me to hear the conversation during one of our scheduled meetings. "We're restructuring our finances and following a strict plan." Malcolm's reaction was immediate and revealing. "What do you mean you can't? Just use some of your retirement money. It's a guaranteed return this time." "No, Malcolm, that's not possible." The confusion in Malcolm's voice would have been comical if it weren't so sad. The concept of his parents refusing a financial request was apparently incomprehensible to him. "Is this Trevor's doing?" he demanded, surprising me with the immediate accusation. "Did he turn you against me?" "Your brother is helping us address financial problems that arose from your business failure," my father replied, with newfound directness. "Problems you left us to handle alone." Malcolm's protests grew increasingly desperate and manipulative, cycling through anger, guilt, and finally pitiful pleading. My parents remained firm, though I could see the emotional toll it took on them. When the call ended, my mother was in tears. "He's never spoken to us that way before," she said, shocked. "Because you've never set boundaries with him before," I pointed out. That evening, I received a furious text from Malcolm, the first direct communication we'd had in over a year. "Congratulations on finally getting Mom and Dad to yourself. Always the jealous little brother." I didn't respond. This wasn't about winning or revenge. It was about breaking dysfunctional patterns that had damaged all of us in different ways. The weekly counseling sessions gradually revealed deeper layers of family dynamics. My mother tearfully acknowledged how her own upbringing had led her to overvalue Malcolm's natural charisma, which reminded her of the popular father she had desperately sought approval from. My father admitted that he had found it easier to connect with Malcolm's outgoing personality than with my more reserved nature. "I didn't know how to relate to you," he confessed during our 5th session, "so I focused on Malcolm instead. It was wrong and I'm sorry." That simple acknowledgement, the first real apology I'd ever received for the years of favoritism, was surprisingly powerful. It didn't erase the past, but it created space for something new to develop. As the months passed, my parents adhered to the financial plan with growing commitment. They sold their luxury car, downsized possessions, and learned to live within a careful budget. The quarterly financial reviews showed steady improvement in their situation. Most significantly, they followed through on the will revision. The updated document reflected an equal division of their remaining assets. When they showed me the signed and notarized papers, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't fully acknowledged was there. "This isn't about inheritance," I explained when they handed me my copy. It's about equal recognition as your son. We understand that now, my father said, and for the first time I believed him. 6 months after my parents agreed to my conditions, the transformation in our family was remarkable. Their home was secure with the trust I established, making regular mortgage payments while they rebuilt their financial foundation. The counseling sessions, which I had expected to be temporary, continued by mutual agreement as all of us recognized their value. Dr. Carter had helped us navigate difficult conversations with unprecedented honesty. My parents had apologized, really apologized, for the favoritism that had defined my childhood and early adulthood. More importantly, they had begun to understand how their patterns had damaged not just me but Malcolm as well. We thought we were showing love by protecting him from consequences, my mother reflected during one session. Instead, we prevented him from developing resilience. My father, always more reserved emotionally, had made perhaps the most surprising journey. During a private lunch after one of our counseling sessions, he spoke words I had waited decades to hear. "I'm proud of you, Trevor. Not just for your business success, but for the man you've become. You had the strength to build yourself without the support you deserved from us. And then you had the compassion to help us when we needed it despite our failures toward you." These words, delivered without drama, but with quiet sincerity, healed something fundamental in me. The approval I had stopped seeking had finally arrived, not as a response to achievement, but as recognition of character. The financial literacy classes had transformed my parents' approach to money. My father, applying his architectural precision to budgeting, had become almost enthusiastic about financial planning. My mother had discovered a talent for finding creative ways to maintain quality of life while reducing expenses. "We should have learned this decades ago," she told me, reviewing their newly positive cash flow projections. "We could have taught both you boys better habits." Malcolm eventually returned from Bali, his funds exhausted and his options limited. His re-entry into the family dynamic was challenging, but necessary. I insisted on meeting him directly, arranging to fly to Boston when he was scheduled to visit our parents. Our first face-to-face conversation in years happened in the same living room where I had confronted our parents months earlier. Malcolm looked both defiant and diminished, his designer clothes now showing where his confident demeanor underlaid with desperation. "So you're the family hero now," he began, defensive before I had even spoken. "There are no heroes or villains here, Malcolm," I replied. "Just family members who need healthier relationships with each other." What followed was a difficult but crucial conversation. I maintained firm boundaries, making clear that I wouldn't tolerate manipulation or attempts to drive wedges between family members. But I also offered something Malcolm hadn't expected: a path forward. "I'm not interested in punishing you or competing with you," I told him. "I'm interested in having a brother I can actually have a relationship with." Malcolm's journey would be the longest and most difficult. Years of entitlement and avoidance of consequences had created deeply ingrained patterns. But surprisingly, once he understood that the old dynamics were permanently changed, he began taking small steps toward responsibility. He found work at a friend's company, not the prestigious finance position he had once held, but steady employment. He moved into a modest apartment and, with our parents' encouragement, began attending financial counseling of his own. Our relationship remained complicated, with occasional relapses into old patterns, but something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, we were relating as adults rather than as competing children seeking parental approval. The revised will remained in place, with my parents now understanding its symbolic importance beyond monetary value. But more meaningful than this document was the revised family narrative we were creating together, one based on honesty, accountability, and genuine care, rather than favoritism and enabling. Natalie and I proceeded with our wedding plans now, with the knowledge that my family would attend, not just physically, but emotionally present, in a way they hadn't been capable of before. During the ceremony, my father's toast surprised guests who didn't know our history. "My son Trevor taught me what real success looks like," he said, his voice steady. "It's not just achievement, but integrity. Not just ambition, but compassion. I'm learning these lessons late in life, but I'm grateful for the chance to learn them at all." The months following our wedding brought continued healing and adjustment. My parents took genuine interest in Creative Sphere, asking informed questions about business strategy and growth plans. They visited us in Austin, spending time getting to know our life there, rather than comparing it to Malcolm's. Malcolm himself made uneven but genuine progress. He had moments of insight interrupted by relapses into entitled behavior, but with consistent boundaries and support, he began developing the emotional muscles he had never needed to use when everything was handled for him. "I never realized how much I resented you," he admitted during a rare moment of vulnerability when visiting Austin. "Not because you did anything wrong, but because you seemed so self-sufficient. I was terrified of failing, so I created situations where Mom and Dad would rescue me. And now," I asked. "Now I'm learning to rescue myself," he replied. "It's harder but better." The true resolution wasn't a perfect family harmony. Such things exist only in fiction. Rather, it was the development of authentic relationships based on who we actually were, rather than assigned roles or parental expectations. It was the freedom to connect, genuinely disagree honestly, and support each other appropriately. For me personally, the journey brought unexpected gifts. By standing firm in my worth and requiring recognition from my family, I found deeper confidence that wasn't dependent on external validation. By offering help with conditions rather than resentfully withholding it or giving in to manipulation, I discovered a more balanced approach to family obligation. Most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most loving action isn't unconditional support or complete disconnection, but rather the middle path of engaged boundaries, caring enough to offer help while respecting yourself enough to require change. If you've ever faced similar family dynamics or wondered how to handle relationships where you've been undervalued, I hope my story offers some perspective. Have you experienced being the responsible one who gets taken for granted, or had to set difficult boundaries with family members? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else facing similar challenges. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more about navigating complex family relationships and building success on your own terms. Hit that like button if this resonated with you, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for your worth isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most healing thing you can do for everyone involved. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, true family bonds aren't defined by DNA alone, but by mutual respect, healthy boundaries, and genuine care. Sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful connections.